Well, good evening. I was reading tonight in the book of Mark, chapter number 4. And this is an Old Testament story that Jesus was telling to the multitudes partially, and then he started explaining to the disciples. And he was letting them know that, the things that you're hearing, they have to have a parable told to them, whereas you should understand. But Jesus was going into detail of what the parable meant. Now, this is the parable of the seed and the sower. We've all heard the story many times, but I felt like that maybe I ought to come, and when I started looking at it, I thought, well, who is this meant for? Who is it related to? And if you read in chapter 4 and you go back up to the top and you go down to verse number 15, you'll pretty much see that he's telling the doctrine. If you look at verse 2, you will notice where the word doctrine is mentioned. And Jesus, no doubt, was telling the multitude the doctrine, but now he's beginning to sort of aiming it to the 12, and he's explaining why he's saying what he's saying to the multitude, and now he's actually talking to the 12 right here. If you notice in verse 15, it says this, and these are they by the wayside. Now he's talking about the sower. If you notice in verse 14, the sower soweth the word. Well, we know that the word doesn't come back void. We might want to think that the word comes back void, but when the word goes out and it does not return unto God void. We know that. We see that in Isaiah 55 and verse 11. If you want to go and check that verse out, not one jot or tittle is going to be swept under the rug, so to speak, in the eyes of God. And in verse 15, it says, these are they by the wayside, talking about the group of people where the word was sown. Now you notice what it says there. The word was sown, but when they have heard, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their heart. Well, Satan can dilute the word, but can Satan remove the word on his own, or can he remove the word when someone don't really care whether they use the word or not? I hope I'm making sense in what I'm saying. See, it says here that Satan took away the word, but could it be that the people allowed Satan to take away the word, or take away the effectiveness of the word? Well, that's just one example in verse 15. It says in verse 16, and these are they likewise which are sown on stony ground, who when they have heard the word, you notice that the word is there, immediately receive it with gladness. So they heard it, they received it with gladness. And then in verse 17, and have no root in themselves, and so endure but for a time. Now, a lot of people is going to say, well, right there proves that the people didn't endure, so that means they was never saved. That ain't the way I take this. Just because they didn't endure, he's comparing it to a seed that has been thrown into stony ground that the root didn't take. But you notice they received it and they heard it, and so endured but for a time, meaning that they had it but for a time. But then, Satan is able to come and weaken the roots. And let's just put it this way. How many people do you think is going to stand before God and God's going to say, you know what? Y'all let Satan rob the word that I planted. Y'all let Satan come and take it away. I believe that there's going to be people that is going to be in heaven that God is going to say, y'all let Satan take away the word. It wasn't meant for Satan to take away the word, but when man is allowing Satan to run roughshod, then Satan, no doubt, can remove the effectiveness of the word. It's just like me taking a medicine and I'll leave the medicine out for 3 months out into the air and the open air, and I allow the air to get to it to the point that it weakens it just by the natural ability of the medicine. Is the medicine still going to be as sharp as it would be if it was in the bottle? I don't think that the medicine's going to be as effective. So he's mentioned here about the ones that has heard and Satan come and removed it. Then we hear the one about the stony ground where there was no root. When affliction or persecution arises for the word's sake, immediately they are offended. How many people do you think is going to get to heaven and they going to basically be guilty of being offended? People's not going to go into heaven perfect. They're just not going in there. If it was, heaven wouldn't have nobody there. They're going to have saved people there. But how many people is not going to have a real good testimony? How many people is not going to have obedience to the Lord? How many people is going to have a lot of issues and a lot of faults with their life? And that's what we're reading about here. Notice verse 18. And these are they which are sown among thorns. Now he's fixing to tell us, such as hear the word. Meaning there's people that was sown among the thorns that heard the word. In verse 19, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lust of the other things enter in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. How many people is going to go into heaven with the cares of the world? I believe it's very possible that there's going to be people that's going to go into heaven with the cares of the world. And see, what it's going to affect is their rewards that they get for faithful service. If I carry a bunch of my worldly cares and my worldly things, and I let them worldly things separate me from the genuine blessing of God, then it makes me lose my reward that God is going to give me. It's not going to stop my salvation, but it is going to affect my reward. And so when he says here, the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. How many people is going to go into heaven rich, but yet they're going to let the riches be a little bit more important on that day than they would have if they would have known that they was going to stand before God. And people preach it day in and day out, Sunday after Sunday. And people try to bring the word out, but how many people pays attention to it? And it says, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lust of other things enter in and choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. How many Christians is going to be unfruitful when they get to heaven? Now that's exactly what he's saying right here. It's not saying that these people are going to lose their salvation. It shows me that there's going to be some that are going to be unfruitful when they get there. And I can prove that to you in the next verse. If you got your eyes on the Bible, look at verse number 20. If I had to pick out a verse that I wanted to talk about, would be verse 20. All of these other verses, I give you the scenario about the ones that were by the wayside. I give you the scenario about the one of the stony ground. I give you the one about the thorny ground and some that were sown among the thorns. And now we get to the verse number 20. And these are they which are sown on good ground. Now, he's fixing to explain what is good ground. He waited to the very last one to explain the values of what is good ground. Now listen to what he says. Such as hear the word. Did these other people hear from verse 15 up to verse 19? Did they hear the word? It shows me that Satan came and removed the word, but the word was there for a time in a season. And if you go in verse 16, you will see where the word was sown there. The word was sown on stony ground, where it says, and they have heard the word. See, there's the word right there in verse 16. And then the word's sake is in verse 17. So that tells you that they heard the word. Verse number 19, the word was choked off. Entering in, choked the word, and becometh unfruitful. All these people heard the word. And verse 20 says, and these are they which are sown on good ground. The first thing that he says about the good ground, such as hear the word. The good ground done something with the word, though. The ones on the wayside didn't do anything with it. The one on the stony ground didn't do anything with it. The one on the thorny grounds didn't do anything with it. The one that had the cares and the deceitfulness of riches, let the deceitfulness of riches dominate the word that they heard. They heard the word. The word was given in all four of these verses. And now we're down at verse 20. And it says, such as hear the word and receive it. Did these other people up here in verse 15 through 19, did they receive it? They received it a little bit. Because it even says here that Satan immediately took what they had received, but when they heard, Satan cometh immediately and taken away the word that was sown in their heart. So the word was sown. They just allowed Satan to rob them. And Satan is out to rob today. He's robbing people left and right today. He's keeping people out of the word of God today. He is making sure that he is running all over the place trying to keep the word of God ineffective. That's what he's doing today. And if you go down and all of these where the stony ground is, it's a picture of the hindrances that is in the people of the stony ground, as well as the ones that were on the thorny grounds. Verse 18. And the ones that had deceitfulness of riches is the one that was in verse 19. But the people that heard the word was sown on good ground. Some people's going to get to heaven and say, God, you didn't put me on good ground. I believe he did, but we let things rob the good ground. And again, I'm going to prove that. It says here, and receive it. Well, when I receive something, I take it. If somebody offered me a gift and they wanted me to receive the gift, it's what I do with the gift of how valuable that gift is. That gift has been given over to me for me to receive that gift. He says in verse 20, and receive it. And you notice what it says after that? And bring forth fruit. Now, up here on the thorns, there was some that come up. There, no doubt, maybe there was some on the wayside that had come up, but then Satan came and taketh away the word that was sown in their heart. So in a sense, Satan goes in there and removes the seed that is planted along the wayside. See, the wayside is never really the intent of having seed put there. I know enough about farming to know that when the man comes and he plants the rye, he don't get along the edge of the fence. He stays away with his machine, probably 8 or 10 foot away from the fence. He don't get right up into the corners, but can God bless the seed that is growing in the wayside? Sure. Because the seed, some of this seed was put there where the word is sown, but see, the wayside takes over when Satan gets involved. You go down and see the stony ground. Did any of the seed come up on the stony ground? But some had no root in themselves, and so endure but for a time. Afterward, when affliction or persecution arises for the word's sake, immediately they are offended. So all of that has a tendency to shorten up our fruit. When he's talking about it in verse 20, all these things that we're talking about, the thorns is the ones that hear the word, and the cares and the deceitfulness of riches and lust of other things enter in. How many people is going to bring things with them when they come? Some people is probably going to argue and tell me, Ken, you're way off base on here. This is a picture of lost people. And it very well could. But I believe that there is Christians that are guilty of being by the wayside. Now, is God going to throw out a person that is a born again, saved child of God that is content to live in the wayside? Is he going to dump all of them out that basically is living by the wayside? How about the ones that are living on stony ground? Is he going to dump all of them if they are a true born again child of God? Is he going to wipe out the ones that is on stony ground? Does that apply to every seed? You take a seed that is on stony ground, a good portion of the seeds might not grow, but you're always going to have a crop that's going to make it through. Even in the stony area, you're always going to have a crop that's going to shine its way through, that made it to the sunshine, that made it out where the plant could grow. Not every plant loses its ability to grow. Not every seed. Some seed grow by the wayside. Some seed is able to grow in the wayside. Is God going to just cut them off and throw them out because they was put on the wayside? No, I don't think so. I think that he is going to examine the fruit like he's talking about here in verse number 20, because it says you hear the word and you receive it and bring forth fruit. A person is going to bring forth fruit. But now here's the kicker. In the last part of that verse, it says some 30-fold. See, there's going to be some Christians that's going to get to heaven that they are going to have a 30-fold reward. What that means is when he's talking about a 30, 60, and 100-fold, he's given that as an example. There very well could be some that is only going to have fivefold. There's some that's going to get there that's going to have 1-fold. There might be another person that might have 15-fold. See, he's not saying that the people is only going to have a 30, 60, and 100. He's saying that it's like a mathematical equation that there's going to be some that's going to have 1-fold. But you know what? Here's the thing. If God only allows a person to have 1-fold, is that valuable to God? Now, y'all think about it. You know, if I walk outside right now and there's a dollar bill laying on my ground and I happen to see it, am I just going to ignore that dollar bill and walk on off? Am I going to just ignore it and let it lay there? And I know it's only $1. I'm not going to pick it up. No, I am going to pick it up because it has a value of $1. So let's shorten it up a little bit more. Say it's a dime or a nickel that is laying on my walkway going out. Am I going to take the time to bend my back over to pick up that nickel? I sure am. Because it would drive me nuts knowing that here it is, I was a wasteful person that didn't take the time to pick up the nickel. Now, if it's a penny, will I be able to see a penny? If I knew the penny was there and I could see a penny, would I pick the penny up? Yeah, I would pick the penny up because I can put the penny in my penny jar inside. It's valued as a penny. So when he says here, some 30, some 60, and some 100, some is going to go into heaven with 1-fold. Some's going to go into heaven with 2 or 3-fold. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to make it into heaven that they're going to be ashamed of themselves because of the fact they allowed themselves to let Satan rob their reward of some 30, 60, and 100-fold. Some of these ones that maybe might have been put on the wayside might have a very low amount of reward. Does that mean that they're not saved because they're on the wayside? I guess some could be considered to be not saved. Let's use that as a scenario. Would there be some that would not be saved? It's possible. Could there be some that is on the stony ground that was never saved? It's possible. They heard the word. If they reject the word, then they rejected the Holy Spirit of God. And guess what? You reject the Holy Spirit of God. But you go on down where it says, you know, they are sown on the thorns. Is there going to be some Christians that's going to get a reward in the middle of the thorns? What happens if you got one Christian that is able to shine for God in the middle of the thorn patch? To me, I see that God would say, you know what? Well done. Even though you had thorns all around you, you had the cares of this world all around you, but yet you shine through them thorns. You shine through the wayside. You shine through the stony ground. And yes, there's going to be some that's going to be on good ground that's going to have 30, 60, and 100-fold. And you know what? There's going to be some that the Lord is going to give 30-fold. There's going to be some that the Lord is going to make sure that 60-fold has been earned. It ain't earned by us. It ain't human beings that do the work to get the 30-fold and the 60-fold. it says, and these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it, and bring forth fruit, some 30-fold, some 60-fold, and some 100-fold. Here's the thing. What you going to heaven with? What are you going to heaven with? Are you going with being planted by the wayside? Did God give you the ability to continue to grow? You going to go there by telling God that, God, I was on the stony ground. You put me on the stony ground. Don't you think that God knows who's been on the wayside and who's been on the stony ground? I think that God knows where our little garden plot is. He sure does. I've got 3 little planters right outside my door that I've got a few green seed in all 3 of them little planters. And you know what? They're growing, but are they going to be anything fit to eat? I don't know. They're growing. You can tell that the seed is shot up and they're growing, but they're not really all that long because I only planted them a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I planted them. But you know what? God sees them little seed that I planted from his viewpoint. From his view up there, he sees the plants that are out there in that little planter out there. He knows which ones is going to be harvested right now. He knows the ones that is not going to be harvested, that's not going to grow. I planted them a little bit thick so that I can weed out a few as they begin to start getting growing and the leaves start getting bigger. My hope is to go in there and nip them off evenly. It's like giving them a haircut. And I hope that they'll be good. I hope that we can have something to eat in the next few months, that we can have something a little bit to eat out of it. Here's what I'm saying. Just because you're on the stony ground doesn't mean that you can't grow and that you can't have fruit. Whether you're on the wayside, the stony ground, the thorny ground, or the good ground. See, everybody wants to think that verse 20 that's where the saved is, because the saved is some 30, 60, and 100-fold. What about if somebody only gets to heaven with 1-fold? Is it beneficial to God? I believe it is, because God is the one that is judging the heart of the one that only had the 1-fold. Something to think about anyway. I hope at least this puts that thought into your mind. Elderly ministry is how you contact me. Look me up if I can do anything to help. This is YouTube right here. You can get me on YouTube. If you want to talk about salvation, I'd ask you to call, leave your name and number, and I'll be glad to get back with you. Here's the bottom line. The one that's going to really have fruit is the ones that saved. If you're saved today, you're going to have fruit. I don't know how much fruit, but some people is going to get there to heaven and they're going to be ashamed of their self. Okay? Don't do that. Jesus paid too big of a price for you to turn him down. Okay. I thank y'all for listening.